Can Auburn beat Vandy if Jarquez Hunter can't run the football?
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zach Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. We are dapping it up with the Daryl Dapprich, Montgomery radio legend here with you. We're going to talk about basketball scrimmage against Furman. They looked good. That's coming up. As well as, all right, Auburn doesn't have many football games left. Which ones are the most important? Is it this weekend? But, Daryl, obviously, Jarquez Hunter has announced himself the SEC's leading rusher, his historic second half against Kentucky. If you're Vanderbilt or ULM or Texas A&M or Alabama, you look at this tape and you say, we've got to stop 27, which we've seen other teams be able to do. Missouri was able to do it a few weeks ago. What happens if Vanderbilt shuts down Jarquez Hunter on Saturday?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think what Jarquez Hunter did last Saturday against Kentucky was announce his presence on a national level. For those of us that have, followed his career the last 3 years and even around the Southeastern Conference, not a surprise. But when you start getting National Player of the Year or National Player of the Week, talk and recognition and others you get people's attention. I think Clark Lee, after what Jarquez Hunter did to Vanderbilt last year in Nashville, is well aware of what Jarquez Hunter can do. Sure. But here on out, everybody that plays Auburn is going to focus on stopping Jarquez Hunter and saying he cannot beat me. I cannot let him beat me. So what will that do? Well, two things. Number one, it's going to force Peyton Thorne to make some adjustments, and it's going to make Peyton Thorne have to win some ball games or make some plays. And maybe Hugh Freeze will be tested on this theory of offensive identity and what Auburn is. Is he going to still stick to the run and do what he did against Kentucky, and even when he sees different fronts and a lot of people load in the box, and still let Hunter try to get a lot of yards? Because I don't think Vanderbilt's got the defense that Kentucky has. I know Louisiana Monroe doesn't. So even if they sell out to stop the run, I still think you stick with it just like you did against Kentucky, even though he was tempted to throw it, and continue to pound Jarquez Hunter. At some point, though, later on in the schedule, I think he's going to have to throw it some to get them out of the box and to lessen it a little bit.
Yeah, I think Auburn has the ability to rush regardless with Jarquez Hunter and Damari Austin, and we'll see how many touches Jeremiah Cobb gets. But if Vandy does stop the run, can Peyton Thorne beat a Vanderbilt defense who's perhaps leaning over their skis a little bit so far this season? I don't know. I have no clue. They've been impressive. They've been super, super fun to watch too. But now that you're playing them, you look at it a little bit different. Now, Vandy has looked a little worse away from Nashville, the powerhouse that is Memorial Stadium. But to me, I don't know if we're going to get to that point. I don't know if we're going to get to that point where it's like, okay, the game is on Peyton Thorne's shoulders. I hope Auburn doesn't get to that point, because if they do, I do get a little less confident going into Saturday.
I have full confidence that Auburn's going to be able to run it Saturday. Again, like you last year, you were very, very bullish on the fact that Hunter was going to break out and have a great game against Vanderbilt, and he did. Now, I know Vanderbilt's better this year from a standpoint of offensively, and with a couple of play callers and Kill and Beck, Pavia being there. But I don't know what they've done defensively to get better. They have, but isn't enough to – I get it. Texas, they did not let Texas get a lot of points, and they kept them kind of at bay a little bit. But, again, that was in Nashville. Away from Vanderbilt Stadium and when they're playing at Jordan-Hare, I don't know. I think a lot of their success of what they try to do defensively is because they play keep away with ball possession. Hugh Freeze talked about that.
Yeah, you're able to do a lot more as a defender if you know you're not going to be out there that much, which is the goal, right? You always want your offense on the field. This defense, too, they'll turn you over. They'll turn you over. And that's another reason why I want Auburn running the ball a ton and not really putting it in the air.
I think what Auburn's found from a blocking scheme and from a blocking combination from an offensive line rotation, they feel very comfortable that they're going to be able to run it. And I think that Peyton Thorne is going to have to pull it some and run it because the Vanderbilt ends are going to be crashing, keying on Hunter, selling out to stop Hunter. And if you just keep handing it to them, at some point they're going to get in there in the backfield with penetration. If you pull it every once in a while, you keep them honest.
Yeah. It's amazing that despite the level of offense Auburn has had this year, that Jarquez Hunter leads the SEC in rushing. That's pretty incredible. With all the offensive line shuffling, particularly on the left side, and guys being dinged up. A solid elite game from Jarquez Hunter now has him at the top of the conference with 863 rushing yards. He leads Dylan Sampson now of Tennessee, who has 838. Then everybody else is less than 800. It's just, I don't know. It's amazing to me.
It's the yards per carry too that stand out to me because I don't know what Sampson's average rushing attempts is per game. We know that Jarquez Hunter went into that game, I think, with 13 or 14, averaging 13 or 14 carries a game, maybe 15. He had 23 against Kentucky, which is about average. I mean, that's not like a workhorse type game.
So Jarquez has 24 less touches than Dylan Sampson. So Jarquez he's got a 7.2 yards per carry, and then Dylan Sampson is at 5.8.
Ungodly. Imagine what he would have. He'd have
1,000. Can you imagine?
He'd have 1,000 yards by now, probably, if he had those kind of touches.
Yeah, and if he had more touches, the average would go down as well. But still, like he'd still be in an elite company. No question about it. No question about it. So excited to see how they continue to use him. It is interesting that, like, and you and I talked about this when we reacted to the press conference on Monday, but I mean, Hugh Freeze is like, I'm having to fight the urge to pass it. Are you concerned about that at all?
Yeah, I am, because I feel like it's in his DNA that even when he knows he's got a successful running back, it's almost like, this is who I am.
Right.
This is how I got here, and I can't help being who I am, so I've got to do it. It's like such a temptation for him. I also wonder at what aspect of that is from a recruiting standpoint. When you go out and get the kind of recruiting class you got from the receiving standpoint, the wide receivers Auburn got, was there a initiative or a promise that, hey, we're going to throw it more, that kind of thing. So all that gets thrown out the window. You win the ball game, and we've talked about this before. You coach to your personnel. You coach with what you have, not what you want. So if Jarquez Hunter is that horse that rides you into another victory against Vanderbilt, you've got to put aside the temptation and the urge to try to do what you think you are and just give him the ball. Yeah. Put your pride away, man, and just – I'm not saying –
let's win some football games. Let's put ourselves in a spot where we can go to a bowl game if we beat A&M or Alabama. This weekend is big. It's big. Is this weekend the most important game remaining on Auburn's schedule? We jump into that discussion in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show brought to you by our friends at Game Time. Game Time has you covered for all of the tickets you could possibly imagine. If it's football, basketball, baseball, whatever it is, Game Time is where you and I go, Daryl, no matter what, to get our tickets.
Yeah, Game Time's the place, and it doesn't matter if it's concerts or comedy shows or theater or sporting events from any type of association, from the NFL to the NHL. Whatever, you can get the tickets you're looking for, where you can see where you're going to sit. You're going to see these lightning deals, just really everything at your fingertips.
Yep, no question about it. And they've got Game Time picks, which kind of curates your selection to give you the best seats per their value and cost. So be sure to check that out. You can take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Auburn's got 4 games remaining on their schedule. Vanderbilt, ULM, Texas A&M, all at home. And then they, of course, head to Tuscaloosa to take on Alabama in this year's Iron Bowl. I think Vanderbilt is the most important game remaining on this schedule, because these other games only matter if you win on Saturday. I think if you win on Saturday, it sets up and makes these games more and more important. You take care of ULM, then all of a sudden, all the pressure that's on this A&M and Alabama game, if you win one of those, you really turn your season around. So to me, I think this game against Vanderbilt is the most important game left on the schedule.
Yeah, I echo everything you're saying. Number one, I agree. It's the most important. First of all, because it's the next one. I mean, it's there on the schedule. It's the one coming up that you have to win. And I think you nailed it when you said you have to win it, because the other ones become extremely less important if you don't. It's like saving pitching in a 3-game series. We always talk about that, where, yeah, you better get to game 1 or game 2 doesn't mean as much. Why are you saving somebody? Yeah. So if you're Auburn, you have to beat Vanderbilt, because then the season sets up to be so much more to play for.
Right.
So absolutely, this is the most important game to date on the Auburn schedule. You're coming back home after long layoff. Your fans should be fired up. You're coming off a win. You got to win this one, or the other ones do not mean near as much, and it makes the task almost impossible if you lose the game against Vanderbilt to get to a bowl game.
Yeah, this the second most important game. You could go any of these 3. I think you can make the case for all of them. ULM, it's a 5-2 football team in the Sun Belt. Like they're not awful, and then obviously the fact of the matter is you lost the equivalent of this game a year ago. Do I think this ULM team is as good as New Mexico State a year ago? I don't. And I also don't think Auburn's going to overlook them like they did possibly New Mexico State a year ago. So we'll see. But then, like, if you win against A&M at home or against Alabama on the road, I think it totally changes the narrative about this season in several different ways. So to me, I think my second most important game is Texas A&M at home, but I don't love putting them as the second most important remaining game.
It's mine as well, and I think it's because where it sits in the schedule, where it lines up. It's the game before the Alabama game. It's at home, and if Auburn takes care of business, meaning Auburn's favored against Vanderbilt, they're going to be favored against Louisiana Monroe. If you take care of business, that Texas A&M game becomes win it and you go to a bowl game. How can it not be the second most important game? Because if you win that game and lose the Iron Bowl, yeah, that stings, but you're going to a bowl game if you take care of business. You're playing Alabama on the road where you've traditionally struggled in Tuscaloosa. You go into Tuscaloosa already with a bowl game wrapped up, that Texas A&M game becomes the second biggest game on the schedule. Absolutely.
Yeah, and then I guess third is Alabama.
Yep.
And as I'm thinking through some of the reasons in my head, I almost want to switch those. But, I mean, depends on who you ask. I think both of these games are gettable for different reasons. They'd still be upsets, no question, but I do think they're both gettable. Am I picking Auburn to win both these games? No, I'm not. But I do think going on the road to Tuscaloosa is going to feel a little different this year than it has in previous seasons where the Iron Bowl has been played in Bryant-Denny. Because they're not this untouchable team like they have been. And depending on what happens when Alabama goes to LSU, like, where are they going to be mentally if they've got 3 losses on the season going into it? I mean, can you imagine if Auburn went up there and gave them their 4th loss? I mean, that would be crazy. That'd be crazy.
And I think, too, the thing that's kind of unique about this predictions and projections is these games could flip-flop. The rankings and the importance of where these games matter in the season can absolutely change. Now, it's tough to go back in hindsight once you've already played it.
Sure.
But if you lose to Texas A&M and you're 1 win away from bowl eligibility, then, of course, Alabama becomes the biggest game on your schedule all year, period, because you're playing for a bowl berth. So as it stands right now, no, it's probably third. I agree behind Vanderbilt and Texas A&M, but it could significantly change in the matter of importance if you lose the A&M game.
Yeah, and I don't love putting ULM 4th of these 4 games because A&M and Alabama are only important if you take care of business against Vandy and ULM. So to me, I'm not I don't love the order of this list, but I do think we have it in the right order.
I agree 100%. I think there's no other way to stack these games up in order of importance than exactly how we did it and for the reasons we gave.
Do you think if we played Vandy last weekend, so this is before like Vandy played Texas and we haven't beaten Kentucky yet, is Auburn favored by 6.5 in that world?
Nope. The win over
it's a little weird to me how we're talking and approaching this game.
The win over Kentucky, for some reason, showed somebody something. There were some things that became evident and apparent, and were a light was shined on them. It was exposed. And I don't know exactly what that is. Is it, finally they have the best back in the SEC and they've decided to use him. If they continue to do that, they'll win more games. Is it that? Is it Auburn's defense starting to mature right before our eyes and finally getting a key defensive stop? Are there things that certain people were looking for to come to fruition that weren't, that they saw in the Kentucky game? Is that it? Is it a combination of, hey, Vanderbilt doesn't play as well on the road as they do at home, and Vanderbilt's maybe susceptible against the run, so this isn't a good matchup for Vanderbilt? I don't know. I can't give you a reason why Auburn's a 6.5, now 7-point favorite. I don't know. I'm shocked that they are.
Where are you on like emotional letdown situation? I mean, this is a Vandy team who they were all in on. I mean, they were the whole like Vandy we turned thing. They really leaned into that and let more fans into the stadium and all of that for this Texas game. And they almost had a shot at it. And then it's like, oh, you don't get it, and you've got to go on the road. Like, do you think that's a factor here?
Could be. I think that they were probably up a lot more emotionally for Texas than they were Auburn, especially looking at Auburn's record and how they were struggling, and Texas being a top 5 team. Pavia may be like, hey, look, I want to prove that it wasn't a fluke last year when I went into Jordan-Hare and beat Auburn, and that could get the emotional level ratcheted up a little bit where normally it wouldn't be, as when you're playing for something to prove it wasn't a fluke. I think that the great thing for Auburn is even after a big victory over Kentucky on the road, there will be no letdown. There will be no take a breath, reset type thing because of what Pavia did last year. I think Auburn will be extremely ready to play this football game.
Yeah, me too. Feel weirdly good about it. So what does that mean? Who knows? Hey, Auburn basketball, they balled out. They balled out in the exhibition game against the Furman Paladins. What does that mean for this season? We discuss in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. The Auburn Tigers defeat the Furman Paladins 83-62 in a game where Johni Broome went 18 points, 14 rebounds, as well as several guys like Tahaad Pettiford making his Auburn debut. He scored 13. It's like everybody got multiple blocks, it seems like. I mean, this team did a lot of things really, really well, Daryl.
They did. And I think the biggest takeaway from this game is lineup combinations. Okay, first of all, Bruce Pearl made the comparison after the game that this had very much of an Appalachian State feel to it, where Auburn went on the road against a smaller school at a mid-majors arena and played a basketball game. I believe this arena, though, was at the bigger arena in Greenville, not Furman's on-campus arena. I think they made it a little bit bigger where the hockey team plays and all that. But he made that point that, you're playing a mid-major and in their backyard, in their arena in their city. Auburn started slow. Shooting the basketball. They caught fire in the second half and got tremendous separation. Yep. They played a ton of people. That's a takeaway, with a lot of different lineup combinations. Pettiford went off as a freshman. You got to see what he was all about. But I think a couple of takeaways to look at. Number one, the starting lineup was interesting. I don't think that's the starting lineup you are going to see once the season started.
J.P. Pegues, Denver Jones, Chris Moore, Johni Broome, Dylan Cardwell.
Yeah, I think that Cardwell and Broome, as we predicted months ago, and people scoffed and laughed, Broome will play a lot of 4. I just don't think it'll start that way.
Okay.
Chad Baker-Mazara did not start, but came off the bench and had 13 points. Miles Kelly was not there because of an illness, and I think he'll end up being Auburn's second best player and second most prolific scorer by the time the season's over. So you got to figure you can pencil him into the starting lineup, whether it's at the 3 or at the 2, and you slide Denver Jones over. I think Chaney Johnson had a nice game, had 10 points, 6 rebounds, couple blocks. That's exactly what we talked about that Chaney Johnson needs to give you. So
if he can give you that every night,
I don't think
Chris,
and I don't think Chris Moore starts. I mean, I love Chris Moore. He's a hard hat guy.
I wouldn't be shocked if he did, though, because we've seen Pearl teams stagger the 3 a little bit to have scoring come off the bench. And so I wouldn't be shocked if you put Chris Moore there with guys who are comfortable scoring. And then when you sub them out, that second wave that Auburn has had over the last few seasons, they'll have it this year. You can bring the scoring off the bench ready to go.
That's true. If you do that, Denver Jones will have to have been playing the 1, and Miles Kelly will have to be playing the 2, because I don't think you have Miles Kelly coming off the bench and Chad Baker-Mazara coming off the bench, both from the 3 position, maybe the 2. And then you got to be careful. If you start Chris Moore and Chaney Johnson at the 3 and the 4 and Broome at the 5, there's a lack of scoring there out of your starting lineup. It's one thing to juggle that and try to get some consistency.
Yeah.
And some, but I don't, and level it out a little bit, but I don't know. I just don't think that'll be the starting lineup, but I think you're going to see a ton of different combinations. And I heard defensively, Auburn just played at a whole nother level with steals and blocks.
Yeah, they forced 18 turnovers. And then they had, so many guys had blocks. Johni had 2, Dylan had 2, Chaney had 2, CBM had 1, Jakai had 1. That's
a lot of blocks.
Which, the length of this team, they should, and it's nice that they executed in their first exhibition game.
Very athletic, very versatile, can play different positions. Pettiford played the 1 and the 2, had 13 points, hit some big threes. I heard there were a lot of and ones in this game too. People driving to the basket, getting fouled. That's nice when you've got dribble, drive, penetration.
Yeah.
I think the threes will start falling, and I think this lineup combination will get some chemistry once he settles on 1. Again, I can't underemphasize the importance of Miles Kelly not being there. Really good player. He's a double-digit scorer, and I think that Auburn fans are going to be extremely pleased with what he brings to the table.
Yeah. So Auburn has another exhibition game this Friday against Florida Atlantic. And so if you want to go see the Tigers, it'll be the easiest time to go see them. Be the easiest time to go see them this year, because this is going to be a hot ticket every single night with this team. This team has it. You can tell, the teams. You can tell the teams early on. It's okay, sure, they've got to still put it all together, and they've got to develop over the course of the season. But you can tell this team's got a shot, Daryl, and I think that's something that can't be.
You think about future opponents that's on Auburn's schedule. Duke beat Arizona State by 60 in an exhibition. I'm not exaggerating, by 60.
Insane.
And then Arkansas really put it on Kansas. That's a little scary. Because, Arkansas
is going to be good.
With Calipari.
Arkansas is going to be good.
And, Alabama's won both of its, beat Wake Forest, beat Memphis, struggled in the second half. So future opponents so far in these exhibition games, it's kind of panning out.
Be a gauntlet.
We thought it was going to be. Absolutely.
Yeah, it's going to be a gauntlet for sure. So, all right, Daryl, how can people check out everything that you've got going on?
Follow me on X, DAP6410. Got some interesting polls that I do every day, a little DAP poll today. You can follow me on Instagram, Daryl DAP, and then with you here on Locked on Auburn.
Yes, and please like the video. Please subscribe and check out the Auburn's newest message board at thebarnauburn.com. That's where Daryl and I post a ton of stuff, thebarnauburn.com. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked on Auburn.